What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Fall of X, not to be confused with the video that we recently did where all the superheroes died. That was Days of Future Past. Totally different story. So what this does here is this basically picks up with Kitty Pryde, who, as we've discussed in recent weeks, is absolutely dope, right? Assassin Kitty Pryde, you guys love her, man. You guys love seeing Kitty Pryde as like an assassin that can phase through objects. And what she ends up doing is making her way into an Orcus prison facility where Cyclops is being held. Now, for those of you guys who are not current with Fall of X, as always, we'll have a playlist that you can click on at the end of this video so you can get caught up. But one of the things we saw at the very beginning of Fall of X, when Orcus made their move and attacked all the X-Men, we saw Juggernaut facing off against Nimrod, this kind of ultimate sentinel, and Nimrod seemingly killed Juggernaut. Turns out he's not dead. The Juggernaut's very much alive, which makes perfect sense because at the time it was kind of like, okay, I guess this is just like a grandiose display of Nimrod's power, but it seems kind of weird that Juggernaut would be killed by Nimrod. That just seems a little strange to me. The dude's alive, which is awesome. But Kitty Pryde, as we know, kind of following her story over the miscellaneous X-Men books, she's kind of going through and basically getting a head count for those mutants, specifically members of the X-Men who have been captured by Orcus and who are still alive. When she goes into the next room, she finds Cyclops there. Now, we knew Cyclops was being held captive. We knew they had sewn his eyes shut so he couldn't use his optic blast, and he's just kind of been held there. Under normal circumstances, she would just free him. But what we end up learning is that he's actually on a dead man's trigger, that in effect, if she tries to remove him from where he's being held, a bomb will detonate somewhere. Now, she doesn't know where that bomb is, and most likely it's in the proximity of that space. And most likely it's in that room, so it would kill Cyclops and whoever it is that tried to free him, which is really just kind of a testament to how far forward Orcus was thinking in regards to like the X-Men retaliating and trying to free one of their own, especially Cyclops, right? He's like a core member of the team and has been a core member of the team since its original inception. The other part of this is that she ends up freeing Juggernaut, but she tells him, do not escape yet, right? Do not leave now. Like, I still have to go get a head count. If you do, it could complicate matters, right? So I'm asking you to do the one thing that you won't want to do the most, which is just stay here. Now, as for how Juggernaut's alive, he basically says it's the Crimson Gem inside his chest, right? That he's still seemingly the Juggernaut that we all know and love in terms of power, but the Crimson Gem also speeds up his healing. For those of you guys who don't know about Juggernaut, the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, the source of his power, advanced healing, incredible strength. Once he starts moving, he cannot be stopped unless the writer who's writing the comic wants him to be stopped. And that's basically it, right? The guy can breathe in space. He doesn't need food, water, all that kind of stuff. The guy's literally a living Juggernaut. And so following that, what you do is you pick up in the Morlock tunnels with Rasputin, who again is a time-displaced mutant from the future that is actually 5 mutants in one. So she's got the phasing ability of Kitty Pryde, the telepathy of Quentin Quire, meaning she's one of the most powerful telepaths in existence, the organic skin of Colossus, and the claws of X-23. You've also got Sync, who can basically duplicate the powers of anybody who's around him, and then you've got Kamala Khan, who's seemingly done nothing this entire time. So, and what they're doing here is they're basically sitting around pondering their next mission, which is to say, going and finding Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four in order to gain information that had been, or at least was believed to have been, removed from his mind by Professor Xavier. But their belief is really less that the information had been removed and more that the information had just been hidden from Reed so he couldn't actually access it. But regardless, they end up basically grabbing a car and traveling to where the Fantastic Four are residing outside of New York, just kind of taking a reprieve. Of course, Rasputin being from the future and being incredibly socially awkward, instead of just like seeing Ben Grimm and just being like, hey, what's going on? We need your help. She just like calls him a golem and then punches him and like sends him flying, which is amazing because the whole time she's doing this, like the other X-Men are like, oh my God, like the Fantastic Four are friends, right? But because she's just so weird and socially awkward, she doesn't quite get that, you know? And so she's like, matters are escalating. They need not. I've simply come here for information. The funny thing is she's met by Johnny Storm, and then using the power of Quentin Quire, right? His telepathy, she shuts his mind down. And then that's when she's met by the arrival of Reed and Susan Storm. Storm. Now, let me tell you guys something. If you guys are not familiar with the Fantastic Four, if like you never read Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four, you don't understand how powerful Susan Storm is. People sleep on how powerful Susan Storm is, right? Like this girl held off the power of Celestials. Like Celestials were trying to destroy her and Reed Richards and them, and she literally popped a shield, right, that kept her protected. That happened in, I want to say it was Fantastic Four issue number 603. It was crazy when that happened, right? It was absolutely amazing. But what goes on here is that when she approaches Mr. Fantastic, right, like he literally tells her, I am the guy you're looking for, and I hope for your sake that my family is unharmed. Because sure, she might be able to like attack him in the moment and knock him out, but let me tell you something, man. When Reed Richards sets his mind on destroying you, there's no hope for you. There's nowhere you can go to be safe from Reed Richards' intellect. That as smart as that guy is, yeah, man, that guy will kill you. Then he'll go to work on you. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those things, right? That dude's just hardcore. But what she does is she says, like, we need to access your mind. And she uses her telepathy to kind of forcefully enter the mind of Reed. Now, one of the things to know is that within the superhero community, there's just a litany of unwritten rules, right? You know, drink Pepsi, don't drink Coca-Cola. But one of the rules here is also that you don't like forcefully enter the mind of an ally. It's something that you just don't do, right? It's just bad form to do that. And so in that moment, like Susan Storm pops a force field around Rasputin to kind of shut down her ability to access Reed's mind. And he even tells her like, that's not going to happen again. Now that happened because Reed simply wasn't prepared for it. He did kind of understand what her powers were, but everything happened so fast that he wasn't able to respond in time. But Reed is perfectly capable of instilling mental blocks or maintaining mental blocks in his own head that would prevent somebody with really any level of telepathy from entering into his mind forcefully. And a lot of that just comes by way of his experience with the X-Men, the fact that the Fantastic Four fought the X-Men and Marvel, his dealings with Galactus, and seemingly any and other cosmic entities in between. But of course, Rasputin, having the phasing ability of Kitty Pryde, just walks right through the force field. But once everything calms down and Ben Grimm gets punched again, you actually end up having Miss Marvel who meets Reed Richards, which is cool, right? It's kind of cool to like see them encounter one another and kind of like talk for a moment and sort of like high five because their powers are very similar. And Reed, because Marvel's kind of forcing it on all of us, is just like, oh yeah, you know, like you got your powers from the Terrigen Mist, which under normal circumstances would kill a mutant, but because the plot demanded it, you survived because the Marvel Cinematic Universe made you a mutant and now Marvel Comics has to do it, even though no one asked for it or wants it. So the thing about this is once they enter into the mind of Reed, you get this really interesting moment where they realized that what Professor Xavier had done is he had hollowed the knowledge out of Reed Richards' mind. Now there is a lot of kind of discussion here, right? Reed says like, as I suspected, the brain can mend and it can change. It's malleable. I will work around this. I'll find a way to gain the information that you need, but we don't definitively really even know if that's possible, right? Because Professor Xavier is such an incredible telepath, it's very difficult to actually pull that off. It's almost impossible to do, right? Like once he removes knowledge from your brain, there's seemingly no way for you to really get it back. They would actually have to go find Professor Xavier and get the information, but they don't know the status of Professor Xavier. They don't know that he's sitting on the mutant nation of Krakoa, right? The island of Krakoa, and is out there doing his own thing, right? And kind of fighting off anybody who tries to invade the island. They think he's dead, right? And so what ends up happening is that once the X-Men basically leave, right? And Reed just kind of continues to work on his own mind, trying to find this information if it even can be found, that there is a bit of musing by the Fantastic Four who really kind of talk about how Orcus is a problem for everybody because Orcus going after the mutant population, it's not going to end there, right? Like superheroes in general will rally against Orcus in favor of the mutant population. Yes, they want to maintain public support, and public opinion is so against the mutant population. If the Avengers seemingly came out publicly in favor of the X-Men, humanity might turn against them. With the Fantastic Four, it could very well be the same thing. Is it kind of crummy to sort of just sit on the sidelines and kind of wait and see how things transpire and then decide who the winning side is going to be and then intervene accordingly? Absolutely. It's a really crappy thing to do, but hey, you know, being a superhero is nothing if not a game of politics. And so at that point, you switch over to this really, really cool moment at the ending of this where you've got Sinister talking to Firestar. Now remember, Firestar was there during the Hellfire Gala. She is a member of the X-Men, but before Jean Grey died, she had tricked the mind of Sinister into believing that Firestar was the one that fed them information that allowed them to launch their attack in the first place, which allows Firestar to be on the inside of Orchis and gain information. And what Sinister reveals is that, quote unquote, somehow or another, Juggernaut had escaped the adamantium collar that was around his neck. Nimrod responded, pummeled his head in a few times, and put the collar back around his neck again. But what Sinister also realized is that with Juggernaut having the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak inside of his chest, it makes him too powerful and too dangerous to try to pacify. So what Sinister intends to do is find some way to basically make Juggernaut unconscious, remove the Crimson Gem from his chest, and instill it in himself. Now, whether or not that'll work, we don't fully know, because it's one thing to be in possession of the Crimson Gem, it's another to have the blessing of Cyttorak. And if you do not have the blessing of that entity, that just astronomically stupid, powerful entity in the Crimson Dimension, then you're basically just holding a useless chunk of rock. But we'll find out what happens in the next X-Men video. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. If you need to get caught up on Fall of X, make sure you click this link to the playlist, and I will catch you all later. Peace.